What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and to another Outriders video. It's been a while since we've had any Outriders news as such, so we don't know when the Worldslayer expansion is coming out. And I've been dabbling in some other games, playing a little bit of Elden Ring, actually playing a lot of Elden Ring, and pretty much anything else that I could get my hands on. However, there's a list of weapons which I made sure that I had available to myself because I believe that these weapons will be super powerful once the expansion drops, and it'll help you to actually dive into the expansion as soon as possible and be able to deal with pretty much any threat that the expansion can throw at you. Now this is of course taking into account that none of these weapons actually get nerfed, so that's a big if right there. However, this is a list of 7 weapons which I think will be really powerful when the expansion comes out, and something that you should definitely consider getting your hands on. Depending on whichever class you want to play, there will be a weapon in this list which will suit that. Now kicking us off and starting with the weapon that's probably the most used right now in the game, I would gamble, is the Funeral Pyre. Now the Funeral Pyre comes with Shadow Comet on it, and when you pair it with Claymore Torrent from Damascus offering, this essentially is a powerhouse AoE killing machine. This weapon, once you fire it from the hip, is able to pull down multiple projectiles and essentially AoE everything to death in a cluster. So this is a fantastic weapon to kill enemies that are clumped up together, enemies in groups, and deal a whole bunch of damage to them. However, that doesn't mean that the weapon is a slouch when it comes to dealing with elites or captains. Through the correct use of certain mods and the correct builds and the correct armor pieces, and basically gearing your character correctly, you're actually able to deal quite efficiently with single target enemies as well. So this just makes the Funeral Pyre configured in this way an all-round really good weapon, and a fantastic weapon to have in your arsenal. Now in second place we have the Anemoi, which I suppose is in some way a controversial choice. The point being that the sort of Moaning Winds meta, as it's called, which essentially doesn't really involve you shooting the gun, or rather getting the most damage from the weapon shooting as much as the reloading mechanic of it, is obviously what drives this weapon. Now whether you use this or whether you don't, whether you think it's cheap or cheesy or anything like that, you cannot argue the power that this weapon has. And configuring all 3 of your weapons, your pistol included, to include some kind of reload mechanism is long since been a way how anomaly based characters are able to push out massive amounts of numbers from their weapons alongside the actual abilities that they use as well. Now, of course, the standard, or I would say the configuration that I use standardly, is the Anemoi with Moaning Winds, which comes on it by default. And then what I do is I put Radiation Splash on there, which is from the Guillotine, and this essentially just means that every time when you reload, you get this massive amount of anomaly damage, almost to the tune of 1,000,000. And this is just a huge amount of damage that you can push out every couple of seconds based off of the cooldown. And what you do is you just run into a group of enemies, you pop this, and it essentially just vaporizes everything around you. The next weapon is an odd choice for me, simply due to the fact that I discovered it very late in my lifespan of playing Outriders, and that is the Voodoo Matchmaker, which by default comes with Ultimate Damage Link. And then you can basically, for your second mod on there, stack anything on there that you want. But in my case here, I'm using Strings of Gauss, which comes from 2 different pistols, either the Bolt and Thunder or the Disintegrator. So whichever one of those 2 you find, you can get the mod off there. And the bottom line is that if you are trying to play a class that you are playing into the debuff meta, and so the idea of your class is not so much to deal as much damage as possible, but rather to augment your partners, your co-op partners' damage, this is a fantastic weapon to play into that style. Ultimate Damage Link allows you to share weapon and anomaly damage, and Strings of Gauss means that even by yourself you are actually pushing out quite a bit more damage, especially to groups of enemies that are clumped together, so that the weapon itself is not completely useless on its own, that you can actually push some damage still. This is quite surprisingly fun to use, especially due to the high rate of fire and how often this weapon procs. So definitely give Voodoo Matchmaker a try if you are trying to build this debuff kind of class. Then looking at a weapon that's just exceptionally good at pushing out raw damage, raw weapon damage, Amber Vault, which by default comes with Killing Spree, combined with Dark Sacrifice, which comes from Fatal Symbiote, is a bullet hose. Now, Amber Vault is a double gun, which means you don't have the long range that comes with some of the other rifle classes, so you might have to go a little bit closer just due to the general inaccuracy and the sort of bullet spread that comes with a double gun. But that being said, once you actually do close the distance and you start using this weapon, you're going to see the dual damage stacking from Killing Spree and Dark Sacrifice add together to essentially turn this thing into a murder hose. So if you are playing a class like, for instance, any kind of bullet build and you want to see something that really pushes out impressive numbers, definitely give the Amber Vault a try. This gun doesn't get nearly enough love, and I really do love it. Then on to like a fun kind of choice for me, something that I sort of created very early on, and then when they buffed some of these abilities, it really made this gun kind of cute and really stand out, and that is the Thunderbird, which by default comes with Ultimate Storm Whip, and then again we're throwing Strings of Gauss on there. And what this does is it turns this into basically a lightning baton, so you are pulling down lightning on top of targets from the main ability, which is Ultimate Storm Whip, but then you're also pulsing out these lightning sort of like bursts via Strings of Gauss to anything around it. So essentially this is like a lightning stick, as I said, and it's kind of like a fun weapon to use, and definitely got a lot more potent by the time just before New Horizon came out and they started tweaking some of the mods, and they really made Strings of Gauss like a hell of a lot more powerful. And they also buffed Storm Whip, or Ultimate Storm Whip rather, so it just really ultimately enhanced the power of this weapon and actually just made it a lot more fun to use. So if you have a Thunderbird lying around in your inventory somewhere in your stash, definitely check it out, put this on there. I think you'd be quite surprised to see just how much damage this pushes out. For my second last choice, we have to give tactical rifles some love. The tactical variant of the assault rifle has in the past and continues to be one of the best choices if you're building a bullet class and you want to deal damage from medium to long ranges. If you're able to get a purple version of this with a high damage roll and maybe something like bone shrapnel on it, and you then pair that with Killing Spree from the Amber Vault, or Dark Sacrifice from Fatal Symbiote, you have the best weapon for that class right there in your hands. Then last but not least, if you're actually able to get the substats on there that matter, like crit damage, short range damage and long range damage, you have probably one of the best rolled weapons in the game. This gun slaps, and if you can get it to roll in the mid 90s, you will have something that essentially one taps or one bursts almost anything in the game, unless you're fighting against a captain or a boss, and even in those cases you're able to 3 or 4 burst things down, especially once you start stacking some of the buffs on, which are intrinsically built into the kind of character that you're trying to build around a weapon like this. So always keep a lookout, don't just auto dismantle things, always keep a lookout for your greens, your blues and your purples. See if the substats roll the right way, and if you end up with an assault rifle with a high amount of damage, that you can change the variant so you can get yourself a tactical rifle and it rolls with something like, for instance, bone shrapnel on it. And then sticking with the assault rifle vibe, and for my last choice, Absolute Zero is a phenomenal assault rifle in the absence of a good tactical variant, and especially if you're playing something like a Technomancer focused in bullet build variant and dipping into Borealis, which means you deal more damage against frozen targets. By default, ultimate freezing bullets on the Absolute Zero means that you're proccing freeze the entire time, which then engages this additional damage that you can get from all of your mods that you have on your armor. And then furthermore, if you pair it with something like Killing Spree, which of course comes from the Amber Vault, or something like Dark Symbiote, or rather Dark Sacrifice, which comes from the Fatal Symbiote, then again you have a fantastic assault rifle here that is able to ramp up and deal a whole bunch of damage, but also lock down enemies with freeze, which is one of the best statuses in the game, because it essentially freezes enemies in their tracks and they don't deal damage to you. Plus, since they're frozen, it's very easy for you to identify crit spots and basically hit them, so you get the additional damage from that. That's it for my list. I gotta say, the game is in a fantastic state right now, and ever since they removed the timers from expeditions, it really means that anything is viable, because as long as it doesn't bother you how long it takes you to get through an expedition, you can pretty much use any weapon out there. Now, if you use one of the 7 weapons in this list, however, you will be able to do quite a bit of damage in whichever expedition you're doing, as long as you're putting a good build behind it and you're sort of feeding into whichever mechanism or mechanic the gun supports. So if you're trying to get more into the anomaly side of things or more into the firepower side of things. Do let me know in the comments down below which weapon I missed, which favorite of yours I did not put in this list. I'm sure there are going to be some guns which I didn't mention, which you guys find to be the best or your favorite to use in the game, and I'd love to hear it. But that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and a goddamn awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.